Welcome to this explainer. Let's dive right in and look at a high-stakes case that completely redefines how we view government corruption. Now, when we think of graft, we usually picture, shadowy backroom deals, briefcases full of cash, and officials getting rich at the public's expense. But what happens when the supposed corrupt act was actually just a panicked, last-minute attempt to get the lights turned on before world leaders arrived at our doorstep? Today, we're unpacking a fascinating 2023 Philippine Supreme Court decision, People of the Philippines versus Lala, Fernandez, Hermoso, and Surla, that takes everything we think we know about government procurement and flips it entirely on its head.
We all naturally assume that bypassing official procedures means someone is guilty of a crime, right? I mean, if you work in government and you break the strict rules of public bidding, you must be up to no good. Well, today we're going to explore why the highest court in the land says that actually isn't always true. And we're going to look at the incredibly fine line between a procedural mistake made under immense pressure and actual, punishable, criminal graft.
Part 1. The Setup. The Pressure of the 2006 ASEAN Summit.
So, to really understand this case, we've got to travel back to 2006. The Philippines was gearing up to host the 12th ASEAN Summit in Cebu. And this isn't just some local festival. This is a major international event with serious global scrutiny. The Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH, was handed the monumental task of implementing several last-minute infrastructure projects under absolute extreme pressure. In July, the Department of Foreign Affairs formally proposed the projects. Then, from August to October, the DPWH scrambled to prepare estimates and budgets to install hundreds of decorative lampposts and street lighting facilities across Manduay and Lapu-Lapu cities. Keep in mind, the summit was originally slated for December, so by November, the officials were in a complete frenzy. They were racing against a ticking clock to get these ceremonial routes lit up before the international delegations landed.
Part 2. The Crime. A Premature Agreement.
When things are moving at breakneck speed, corners sometimes get cut, and in the strict world of government procurement, cutting corners is a massive red flag. There was a glaring discrepancy in how this played out. The official public dropping and opening of bids for this lighting project happened on November 28, 2006. But wait, 6 days earlier, on November 22nd, the DPWH officials had already signed a memorandum of understanding with a contractor named Gampic, officially authorizing them to immediately proceed with the work. They guaranteed payment and told the contractor to start before the bidding even occurred. Gampic essentially had the job before they supposedly won it.
Part 3. The Conviction. The Sandiganbayan's Verdict.
Unsurprisingly, when the anti-graft court, the Sandiganbayan, reviewed this timeline a few years later, they brought the hammer down. They looked at that early memorandum of understanding and concluded that Gampic was absolutely predetermined to be the winning bidder. From a purely procedural standpoint, they ruled that the November 28 bidding was just a fake, a mere formality to cover their tracks. Because of this, the court ruled that the DPWH officials gave unwarranted advantage and preference to Gampic. They found the officials guilty of manifest partiality and gross inexcusable negligence, which are key components of Section 3E of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. The punishment? A heavy sentence of 6 to 8 years in prison, plus perpetual disqualification from holding public office.
It seems like an open and shut case of government corruption, doesn't it? They broke the rules, they predetermined a winner, and they got caught. But as the officials appealed their conviction to the Supreme Court, we have to ask a crucial question about the law itself. Does messing up the procurement timeline automatically mean you committed graft?
Part 4. The Twist. The Supreme Court steps in.
This is where the Supreme Court steps in and completely pulls the rug out from under the Sandiganbayan's conviction by strictly analyzing the text of the law itself. Under Section 3E of Republic Acts 3019, the prosecution has to prove 3 things beyond a reasonable doubt. First, the accused is a public officer. Check. Second, they acted with manifest partiality, evident bad faith, or gross inexcusable negligence. And third, their action caused undue injury to the government or gave a private party unwarranted benefits. The Supreme Court noted that you absolutely must prove all 3 of these. You can't just prove a rule was broken, you have to prove the specific malicious mindset behind it.
So the really crucial point here is that making a mistake, or even deliberately bypassing a rule out of sheer panic, just isn't enough on its own. The Supreme Court broke down these heavy legal terms. Manifest partiality, that means a notorious bias. Evident bad faith isn't just bad judgment, it's a palpably fraudulent purpose, a conscious doing of a wrong for some perverse motive. Gross negligence is willful indifference. In short, the prosecution must prove an underlying evil or corrupt motive, not just that a bureaucratic step was done out of order. To really hammer this home, the Supreme Court relied on a powerful recent precedent, the case of Martel v. People. They emphasized that without corrupt intent, which is literally defined as the dishonest acquisition of gain, a procurement violation is just a procedural error, not a crime under the anti-graft law. The law is designed to punish actual corruption, not administrative desperation. If there's no graft, there is no violation of the Anti-Graft Act.
Part 5. The resolution? The absence of corrupt intent.
Keeping that rigorous legal standard in mind, the Supreme Court looked at the actual facts on the ground, and they revealed some totally game-changing realities. First, Gampic actually was the lowest bidder, and they were fully qualified. Second, investigations proved the project was absolutely not overpriced. Third, the DPWH was under massive pressure. With only days left before the deadline, the contractor was, understandably, refusing to start working and spending their own money without some kind of written guarantee because official government funds hadn't even been released yet. The legal officer of the DPWH admitted he came up with the idea of the MOU just to force the reluctant contractor to start putting up the lights. There was no evil scheme to profit here. It was just a desperate, mistaken belief in an emergency legal maneuver to save the country from international embarrassment.
And this brings us to the absolute most incredible irony of this entire explainer regarding the so-called unwarranted benefits the contractor supposedly received. Remember, the lower court sentenced these officials to prison for giving Gampic a massive corrupt advantage. So what exactly was their grand, illicit payday for rushing to install these lights?
0 pesos. Literally nothing. That's right, the contractor accused of being the beneficiary of a highly lucrative corrupt government scheme actually did all the work under crazy pressure and was never paid a single peso by the government for this specific contract. It is incredibly hard for a court to find that a contractor received an unwarranted benefit from a corrupt conspiracy when they essentially worked for free. This fact alone completely shattered the prosecution's narrative of a corrupt intent to defraud the government. Comparing the approaches of the two courts reveals a massive philosophical divide. The Sandigan, the lower court, focused strictly on adherence to procurement timelines. To them, a broken rule equals graft. End of story. But the Supreme Court took a wider, much more nuanced view. Their primary focus was on the presence of underlying corrupt intent. Because there was no overpricing, no unqualified bidder, no payment made, and immense time pressure, the Supreme Court ruled there was absolutely zero evidence of corrupt intent, leading to a full acquittal for everyone involved. This case leaves us with a truly fascinating legal and ethical dilemma. It proves that a procedural irregularity is not automatically a crime if the heart isn't actually corrupt. But it also opens up a really complex conversation. So I'll leave you with this. When public officials face impossible, immovable deadlines, where exactly is the line between a necessary practical shortcut to get the job done and a punishable crime? How do we ensure transparency without completely paralyzing the government in times of emergency? It's a delicate balance, and as this case shows, sometimes you have to look past the paperwork to find the truth. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the rules.